All right, folks, we are live on a Sunday night once again on the Big Fight Weekend YouTube channel. Not only that, but later in the evening, overnight Sunday into Monday, we're also in podcast form. Two for the price of one here on this edition of the Fight Freaks Unite recap. Coming off of the weekend, I am merely the somewhat capable host, TJ Rives. Hello to our insider, Big Dan Rafael, as we do this live on a Sunday. This has kind of been... Look, Keyshawn Davis ruined a lot of things for a lot of people. He ruined what our plan was on Saturday night to recap his main event on the Top Rank Boxing show that never came off. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fights that did happen. Rafael can't wait to talk about Fabio Wardley and Tim Burr with the big right hand. That and the Sunday championship fights in Japan and Australia. A ton to recap, some news, and a little more. Good to be with you live, my friend, on a Sunday on the YouTube page here this evening.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, although I'm doing it the same way we always do it. I see you in the two boxes and we do the show. If there's a lot of people watching us as we're doing it, that's a whole different ballgame. I am chipper because I'm glad that I did not waste my time of making the trip to Norfolk, which I considered. I live about 3.5 hours from Norfolk. Could have taken the train, could have taken the drive. And I decided against it because of all the fights that were on Sunday also. And I'm glad that I didn't waste my time because what an absolute disaster.
All right, we'll get into that disaster coming up. Again, for the podcast audience, we're doing this live, but you're hearing us at the normal time. Thank you for finding us. Make sure you're following and subscribing on podcasts. If you're seeing us through Dan's social media promotion, through his different outlets, etc., if you're seeing us for the first time, where you been? But also, there's a podcast. Go find it on all the podcast outlets. It's the Fight Freaks Unite recap that we're doing here. Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. It's the Big Fight Weekend podcast feed. And as I have here for the video audience, because I'll keep making reference, the video audience can see us, blah, blah, blah. Make sure to help us out on this channel. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. Make sure to hit the like button, share this out, engage with us. We're live tonight. We'll take some comments here in a little bit as we go through the roll call. So that's different from the podcast when it's just you and me. We can have audience interaction, live interaction tonight. So let's do that as well. All right, so let's get into what happened after you and I left the Bet US boxing show, which we do on their outlets and their platform. At that point, we knew Keyshawn Davis had badly missed weight. Our belief was they were going to try being the key word, to work out keeping the main event intact, even though Davis was being stripped of his WBO lightweight title. That blew up Friday afternoon and into Friday night. You did some reporting. Excellent job. I prop you for getting the parties involved, including Samson Lukowicz, the promoter for Edwin De Los Santos, to give you some comments about what went on. So give the audience a recap here of how and why this blew up. And frankly, I will just say at the outset, I was surprised they didn't pull the whole show. They kept the whole show together. Go into why on that. So go ahead.
I'm not surprised they didn't pull the show. That's not Top Rank style. Everybody else was there. Everything else was in place. And you don't penalize an entire card worth of people that have done their jobs and prepared diligently, made the weight. There are still a lot of people that bought tickets that did not return their tickets. They had sold over 10,000. They said on the broadcast, I also heard from Top Rank, only about 2,000 returned their tickets. So you still go forward and you work out the particulars later. You don't penalize an Abdullah Mason and everybody else on that card because Keyshawn Davis is a knucklehead. So I'm glad the show went on. In terms of what happened, Samson Lukowicz, who was the promoter of Edwin De Los Santos, and Bob Arum, the promoter of Keyshawn Davis, neither one of them, both of them were supportive of the fight not happening. They were fine with it. Arum was ticked off. He says, if it was 1 or 2 pounds over, I talked to Bob a few times during this whole situation. 1 or 2 pounds, we would have worked it out. 4 pounds plus, he understood that was ridiculous. And as he said to me, I lived through Castillo, and he's talking about Jose Luis Castillo missing weight for a lightweight championship fight twice on fights that Bob promoted that were much bigger deals than Keyshawn Davis's first title defense. So he understood. And Samson's perspective was they were not unwilling to make the deal, which would have required a penalty in terms of money, as well as a morning of the fight weight check, where he wouldn't have been able to have put on more than 10 pounds without additional penalties. But the way he explained it was during the weigh-in, before he actually stepped on the scale, he was backstage and he said to me that he saw Keyshawn Davis playing around and smiling and dancing and his perspective. And he made the point, as a guy that's been in this business over 30 years, if you're struggling to make the weight and you're really hurting, you're not backstage before you stand on the scale dancing and singing. And then when he touched him on the back and he felt that there was, he just could tell that he hadn't really tried, because, there was no, you didn't feel the way you would feel if you were really struggling to lose weight. And at that point, while they discussed the financial parameters, he said he and Edwin Delos's trainer decided, you know what, it's in our fighters' best interest in the long term not to do this fight. And as he made the point again, we're not going to risk our fighters' health for money. And it's hard to blame them. And it's unfortunate because his guy hadn't fought for, almost 2 years. And, we'll see if they work out a situation where they'll receive the purse because he did his job. Hopefully they'll get that, maybe at least part of it. I think that's still, as Top Rank and Samson said, they're talking about it. But it's such a bad reflection on Keyshawn.
Amen.
Terrible. Just absolutely
so
great job. Ridiculous.
Great job getting that comment from Samson Lukowitz. And I thought it really stood out that it almost seemed to me that they knew this a couple of days before, obviously, and they were trying to get one over here where he was going to go ahead and fight at a real advantage of not having weight cut and try to even, get down close to 137 or 136.
Is what they could have done. Keyshawn, 100%. If you're that much over and you've been in a boxing lifestyle for so many years, at a certain point you're not making the weight. So at the very least, he could have told Top Rank. They could have let Samson know ahead of time, hey, here's the situation. And at that point, De Los Santos doesn't have to continue to deplete himself to get to 35. And even if it turns out to be a non-title fight, maybe they still do the bout. And instead of being 135, they do it at, 137 or 138. And it's non-title. And everybody still puts on a show and gets paid, blah, blah, blah. And instead, he kept it a secret. And when he showed, see the look on De Los Santos's face when Keyshawn Davis got on the scale and they shouted out the weight. He was like, what the heck's going on here? I mean,
I don't
that's
know if
just
it was
not,
as good as the look
fair.
on your face when I told you live on the Bet US show. And I even put the photo up of Big Dan with the hand on the head of what are we doing here?
It's just
when you're
so
almost
ridiculous.
5 pounds off of weight. Okay. So I'm going to pose one more thing. I'm not trying to cause trouble, but isn't this a legitimate point here? Does this call into question Keyshawn Davis's future with Top Rank in that it's not a knee-jerk thing? He had a positive marijuana test a couple of fights ago. They have built him up. He is now stripped of the title that he had. Would these antics in some way, and you have a lot of insight, jeopardize him with Top Rank, or is that too reactionary off the weekend? Including, we didn't even cover the skirmish in the bowels of the Scope, the arena in Norfolk.
We'll get to that.
Keyshawn's involved in like a non-sanctioned bout in the hallway. Does this call into question him with Top Rank?
No. First of all, at the very least, he could have made the weight, acted professional, had a fight instead of fighting in the bowels of the arena and defended his world title and made a 7-figure payday instead of doing the nonsense that we'll get to and getting kicked out of the arena. Top Rank is not going to release him. At the worst case scenario, they'll sit him down for a while. But he's still a valuable commodity. He's still a quality fighter, despite the emotion of what happened over the weekend. And they have plenty of time left on their deal with him. They're not going to cut him. They're gonna work it out with him. And talent wins out, and he can still fight. They'll give him another chance. They'll have a stern talking to with him, I'm sure, him and his management and his team. And they'll move him up, as Bob Arum said to me. We'll move him up to 140. But that's the knee-jerk reaction that you're just going to release the guy is just stupidity. That's not even in the realm of possibility. When he fights next, that's up in the air, and under what circumstances and for what money, obviously that's all going to be discussed and negotiated. But you do not take a supremely talented young man like that, whatever the issues are. He didn't kill somebody. He didn't go to prison. He fucked up bad, but he's going to take some heat for it, obviously, but you're not just going to release him from the contract. That makes no sense. So
pick up on the incident with Nahir Alexander, the fighter.
Nahir Albright.
I'm sorry, Nahir Albright. I believe Nahir Alexander is a player for the Green Bay Packers, and he made the show tonight. But in any event, Nahir Albright is the fighter that Keyshawn Davis defeated and then had the positive marijuana test. And then Albright beat one of Davis's brothers on the undercard, and then pick up what was going on. We saw the video that ESPN showed.
Well, they didn't
pick up on all of this.
There's two incidents, TJ. You got to
go
get
ahead.
it right. After Albright, who, as you mentioned, had the close fight with Keyshawn, and then it became a win for Keyshawn that became the no contest because of the positive marijuana test. Nahir Albright had not fought since that bout, which was at the end of 2023. For this event, they matched him. Nahir Albright moved up from 135 to 140, and he fought Keyshawn's older brother, Kelvin Davis, who was undefeated going into the fight. And Nahir Albright won the fight. And matter of fact, the judges called it a majority decision. One of the judges had the audacity to give a score of 95 to 95, which is ridiculous. That was an 8-2, 7-3 kind of fight at worst. There's zero chance that you can find 5 rounds in any universe to give to Kelvin Davis in the fight. But be that as it may, the other 2 judges properly scored the fight in favor of Albright, who didn't get fucked on the hometown decision in Norfolk. And okay, so Kelvin took his loss. I mean, he fought, he tried. It wasn't like it was a terrible fight or anything. They both gave it their effort, and one guy wins, one guy loses. Okay, fine. So now the fight's over, and Albright is back in his dressing room, and he did an interview during part of the undercard after that, before the main event, with Mark Kriegel from ESPN. And if you notice, he's sitting there, and he's got an additional big giant lump on his eye or head that wasn't there when he was standing there getting the scores read.
When he left the ring. Okay.
Yeah. So he said to Kriegel that Keyshawn Davis and Keyshawn's younger brother, he's the middle of the 3, the Keon Davis, who's a welterweight who won by a second round knockout on, the further down portion of the preliminaries. They came to his dressing room and basically attacked him and got up in his face and headbutted him and had to have the teams break them up. Just complete nonsense. They attacked the guy after he won a hard fought fight with their brother. I'm not sure what they accomplished with that. And so that's a second negativity for the Davis family and what has been a complete meltdown of a weekend. And so there's no video of that incident. I was told by others from Top Rank who I spoke to after the show that absolutely what Albright said is accurate, that incident did happen. So he's not making it up, and he has the extra lump on his head to show it. After that happened, Albright's brother, who was there, and Keyshawn get into it in the bowels of the arena, and there was a giant melee, and the Norfolk Police Department was there to break it up. That's what ESPN showed the video of.
Yep.
Furthermore, you got Keyshawn, whose infant son was born during his training camp for his previous fight, is sitting in a stroller unattended while people are all over the place. Very dangerous for a toddler, an infant.
Stupid.
Like that. And then the cops kicked him out of the arena. Should have arrested the motherfucker.
And so I'm just, can I put it up there one more time? I'm not trying to egg you on. I don't know. All right.
Well, I stand by what I said.
I know what you said, but
there's no chance they release him.
All right. No chance. All right. None. So all of that happened. And is there any chance that Nahir Albright might file assault charges? Because that has nothing to do with going into the ring. I don't know what he said. I didn't see that part about whether they're just going to let that part go.
That's a good question. I mean, he obviously would have some type of grounds for it. What he said was, his assault charge possibility notwithstanding, he made the point, I'd like a rematch with Keyshawn Davis. We can settle like men in the ring, not like punks in the back of in a dressing room, in an arena. We'll settle it in the ring in front of all the fans. And the reality is, Nahir Albright, he did not win against Keyshawn in that fight. Granted, it became a no contest. That was that was by far the most competitive fight that Keyshawn Davis has had in his young professional career. So I suppose that's a conceivable thing later down the road. But for the meantime, you have Keyshawn Davis missing weight dramatically, not telling anybody, blowing the fight, missing his payday. His brother loses. They attack the winner of the fight, and then him and the brother of the guy that they attack get into it in the arena. Like, it's just a cascading pile of shit for the Davis family.
Can't make this stuff up. Okay, so Abdullah Mason did score a TKO victory in what turned out to be the elevated main event. Just say something about him real quick. And does he factor in? Some are theorizing that if there's a vacant WBO title and De Los Santos is involved, that Abdullah Mason might be the name that slides in. I have no idea about any of that, but people are theorizing that. What about how Mason looks? Say something about that real quick in the recap mode.
Well, Mason looked really good. I mean, he acted like a professional. He went in there and he did his job, whether he was in the co-feature as he originally was supposed to be, or he was, in the elevated main event that was made because of what happened with the other fight being canceled. And he went in there and he did his job and he looked strong doing it. He took apart Jeremiah Nakatani, stopped him in the 6th round. The fight was stopped, but it was in the 5th round, but it was 1 second into the round because they had called a timeout to examine him and the bell rang. So really he worked them over through the 4 rounds. And then it got stopped 1 second into round number 5. But it was a dominating performance. He had a bad cut. Nakatani told the doctor when they had called timeout to check him out that he couldn't really see out of the eye. Anytime a fighter says that, automatically the fight's going to be stopped. The doctor said so. Referee stopped the fight. And Mason moves on. And, he's a good-looking prospect. He continues to rise the ranks. He's now 19-0. Your point about fighting De Los Santos for the vacant title, that won't happen. Abdullah Mason is number 2 in the WBO rankings. UK fighter named Sam Noakes, who was undefeated, is number 1. The WBO probably in the next few days will order that mandatory fight. And when Abdullah Mason was questioned about the possibility of that match being his next fight, he said, absolutely, I'm interested. Mark Kriegel asked him, if it had to be the case, would you go to England to fight him? He said, well, we'll do whatever it takes to make the fight. He wants the title shot. I'm not sure he necessarily deserves it at this point, or Noakes, because they haven't really fought that level, but it's boxing today. For whatever it's worth, they are ranked in those organizations. And, at least if it's Abdullah Mason versus Noakes, they're 2 guys who are young, who are around the same level of experience in terms of their pro number of fights. Bring it on. If, Keyshawn didn't want to be champ anymore. What I found more disrespectful, by the way, when Keyshawn made his comments was about how, I was going to move up to 140 after this fight anyway. Well, now you go down, you won your title, fine, but you never defended it. And you acted like a punk on the way out of lightweight.
Yeah. And by the way, I need to say something too, because I'm big on this. I need to correct the fact that we were live on the Bet US show and there was a lot going on in our final 10 minutes of that live show on Friday. So during one part of you and I going back and forth with the breaking news, I was trying my best to listen to Keyshawn Davis's off-the-cuff interview with ESPN Plus's Christina Poncher on the Top Rank broadcast on social media and on YouTube of the weigh-in. And what he said was, I outgrew it. He said, I outgrew it, meaning the weight, 135. I thought he had said, I blew it. To this moment, I don't know that he's ever really apologized at all. And this goes back to what I was saying, and then we're going to wrap up and move on. I think he was trying to get one over here on, I'm not going to cut the weight. I'm not going to go hard. They're going to still do the fight because I'm the main event drawing card, and I just won't strain myself to make 135. So my attitude is he didn't own it Friday. I made a mistake of portraying that he did own it to a degree. And so he was admitting I outgrew the weight, which means they knew last week. Yeah.
PJ, that's not an admission. That's a lie. Because he made the weight, no problem. Now, even if he had a little problem, he still made it in February.
Well, right.
And as Timothy Bradley pointed out, he's looked his best he's ever looked in his last few fights. And, you didn't want to make the weight. And when you're listen, and Timothy Bradley's an expert on that because he made weight as a professional boxer, champion, Hall of Famer for a long time. I've been around weigh-ins and boxing matches for 20 some years. And if you are, it's like Aram said, if you're a pound over, it sucks and it's unfortunate. Shit like that happens. 4.3 pounds is not I outgrew the weight. 4.3 pounds is I don't give a fuck.
I wasn't trying to make the weight, and there's a difference. There's a distinction. All right, we gave that a bunch. We've got people commenting real quick. And again, for the podcast audience, I say again, we were doing this live on Sunday night before it went out on pod, so we're catering exclusively to the YouTube audience right now on the live show. Pod audience is hearing it as normal on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, on the Big Fight Weekend podcast feed. But the commenters get to get in here real quick. And let's see. Adam says, glad to see you guys are back live on the show. I subscribed. Thank you, Adam.
Good
stuff with that. Julio watching says, thank you for being live. And then later says, hey, Dan, after the altercation, do you think Nahir Albright and Keyshawn Davis run it back with a rematch?
That's what he wanted to do. I mean, whether that happens or not, I mean, who the heck knows? But you know what? If Keyshawn's going to go to 140 when he eventually does fight, I mean, it's a little bit crazy, but boxing, this is the way that fights get made to create some interest from the public. And I'm sure that for an otherwise sort of like whatever fight, because of what occurred, yeah, there'll be some interest. So if he's not going to probably get a championship type fight in his first fight at 140. And meanwhile, Nahir just moved up to 140 and beat the brother. So you got revenge of the brother. We've seen that angle, with the Klitschko's, for example. And we also have the supposed altercation in the dressing room. So, it's unfortunate that you reward Keyshawn for that, but Albright kind of deserves a reward. He beat the brother and he put up with the nonsense. So why not?
All right. By the way, our buddy Gail, the PR pro from San Diego, says, yes, catching the show live. She's West Coast. So it's like late afternoon for her. She further said, hey, TJ, you aren't the only one with the impression Keyshawn never intended to make the weight. And Dan, you were just saying that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Samson Lukowicz said. That's what
it looks like.
Believes. I mean, you don't got to spend a lifetime in boxing to know. Again, I'm going to reiterate, if you're 4.3 pounds over, there probably wasn't a concerted effort when it was only a couple of months ago you made the weight and won the world title.
Zero. He missed it, as I like to say, 3 exits back on the highway, on the interstate. By the way, our buddy Jinru Jr. 33, who's in our Bet US live chat and commenting all the time, is watching us tonight on YouTube. Thank you, Jinru Jr. He says, I lost a crap ton of respect for Keyshawn Davis. So did a lot of people.
He blew up his reputation, TJ, like
in one weekend. In one weekend. Terrible. All right, let's move on. What a thrilling end to the Queensberry DAZN main event, Saturday afternoon, U.S. time, Saturday night in Ipswich, England. Justis Huni was well on his way to making me look like a genius, Dan Rafael. And then we were reminded why it's boxing.
Boom goes the dynamite.
Why boom goes the dynamite, baby. Why there's a 21-point touchdown pass that the NFL doesn't have. There's an 8-run home run that boxing doesn't have. There's a 9-point shot that basketball doesn't have. That is a one-punch KO, and there it was from Fabio Wardley. Wild ending to a fight that he was being dominated in. Huni, the Australian, was dominating the fight, but boxing is just different. It is just different, my friend. Go ahead.
It was a entertaining fight for sure. And as we discussed in the pre-fight, what did you feel like was going to be the reason for the guy to win? Was it Fabio Wardley with the tremendous punching power, was knocking everybody out, who, although he had no amateur background, he had a handful of white collar type fights and was, started from nothing basically in terms of his boxing, who had a few more pro fights than Huni. But Huni, even though he had fewer fights as a professional, was a stellar prodigy like amateur, was fighting the absolute elites in the world at age, as a late teenager into his early 20s, and was very fast with his feet, great hand speed, not as big of a puncher, obviously, as Wardley, but had tremendous amateur pedigree. And the pedigree was showing, and the skills were showing in that hand speed advantage and foot speed advantage. All of that was showing because, as you said, he was dominating the fight. Now, if you look at the scorecards before Wardley came through with that massive right hand to score the knockout, as I look at the scores here, he was ahead 89-82 on 2 scorecards and 88-83 on the third, and he was cruising to what was going to apparently be a decision victory. And in the 10th round, as he said in the post fight, as the commentator said, as anybody that's watched boxing where there's a big one punch kind of knockout like that, especially in the heavyweight division, but really in any division, if you are not locked in every single second of the round, it only takes one punch, and heavyweights in particular. And he kind of let up a little bit, let his guard down. They were both throwing right hands at the same time. And although Huni is the better fighter in terms of the hand speed, Wardley had, I guess, a little bit of the longer reach, and his right hand hit the target before Huni's.
The right on the literal example of he beat him to the punch with the right on the smoosh, right on the chin, the jaw, and the face.
As my good pal and former longtime ESPN colleague Teddy Atlas would say, he had the delivery system. You can have all the power in the world, but if you don't have a way to deliver it, it doesn't matter. You have a missile sitting in your yard, and you don't have a launcher, it doesn't make a difference. But Wardley had the delivery system, and he landed the shot right on the button, knocked him flat on his rear end, on his back. And he went to his knees. Some have suggested it was a longer count. If you time it out, it was basically exactly 10 seconds. And it's still a judgment call by the refs. Some are a tick slower, some are a tick faster. There was nothing untoward about this, in my opinion. Huni did not complain. He did not beat the count that John Latham, the referee, issued, and he was counted out. And he was a class act afterwards. He gave Wardley good credit. I'm sure he's brutally disappointed because it was a huge opportunity. Wardley gets a dramatic knockout in the rain in front of a hometown crowd. There was some 20,000 that they reported on the DAZN
a hometown crowd that Huni had silenced for about 6 or 7 rounds until boom.
And for what it's worth, and it is worth something because it will help him make bigger purses, he does win the vacant WBA interim heavyweight title, puts him in good position, as Frank Warren said. Wardley, as Frank and Wardley said, he has a child on the way that's due to be born like in any day now. So he'll sit back. He'll take a little break after a tough fight. He'll watch how things play out in terms of what's going to happen with Dubois and Usyk and maybe some other heavyweight fights before they reconvene for what they will look for in the next bout. But clearly he's in a great position right now. He's super exciting. He's entertaining. He's got a very interesting and I like his personality. He's really well spoken, and he makes no bones about it. He goes, "I'm not a skill guy." He said in his post interview, "I'm not Usyk. I'm not Huni. I don't have those types of skills, but I know how to win fights." And he's got the power to do it, and he'll knock out any heavyweight in boxing if he lands that right hand. Apparently, that's the way it looks to me. And he's scored another good quality win. And you know what? I'll tell you, I think Huni's gonna be dogged by the fact that people are gonna say you don't have a great chin. He had a reputation to maybe not have the best chin, even though he'd never been stopped until that fight. But if he doesn't take the loss too hard, he can still come back and be a good heavyweight. He's only 26 years old. He's got a loss that was one punch, otherwise dominated a good fighter. He's got really, really good skills. And, hopefully, I actually think despite the knockout, he may have elevated himself a little bit in this defeat because he showed his skills to the world.
He looked great for a lot of that fight. Now, you can question punching power, but he landed. He had almost a 50% accuracy on power punches through the first 9 rounds before getting hit with that big one.
Fabio Wardley is not going to ever be confused with the Willie Peps and Floyd Mayweathers.
Well, right.
Defensively.
And you wonder at the highest levels if he even has a chance because he was getting hit like Lionel Richie all night long, baby. But he landed a big punch that mattered. And so there you go on that. By the way, again, thank you for finding us. Dan, go ahead and hit retweet, hit the repost on the social media again for the audience to find us here tonight. If you're just joining us live as Dan is promoting, maybe you're watching the show back later on in the evening. We did this live, the Fight Freaks Unite recap live on YouTube. The podcast audience is hearing it as the recap pod that it normally is Sunday night into Monday. But we're doing this live on YouTube tonight, and we want many more people to join in. Some more people are commenting. We're going to go through the other 2 fight cards, and we'll maybe get to a couple of other comments. Dan will have thoughts on the International Boxing Hall of Fame induction ceremony on this Sunday afternoon that included Manny Pacquiao as well as others. Stand by for that. So moving along off of Saturday, we go to Sunday morning U.S. time, Sunday night in Tokyo. Junto Nakatani does become the unified bantamweight champ by virtue of a TKO over his opponent who had the gnarly right eye. Again, in watching this, I actually watched it live. I was up Sunday and they fought late enough on Sunday morning Eastern time where I was watching live, and he just battered the opponent, especially with the left hand. That eye started to swell at the end of the 4th round. It was swelling badly in the 5th round. By the 6th round, he could no longer see out of it. I was surprised at the referee. Maybe they did call the doctor over once to look at it as it was swelling. So it's a TKO win, and Nakatani has done his part to set himself up for a mega matchup with the monster Naoya Inoue down the road. Dan, give more thoughts on what you saw out of Nakatani's Sunday win.
Yeah, that fight between Nakatani and Inoue, he reiterated in his post-fight interview that's what he wants. He basically said in Japanese translate, he says, "I'm going to be there soon," and then going up to junior featherweight. Please wait for me, is what he's saying to Inoue. Look, they back in April, they were both attending at the Japanese Boxing Commission's annual awards gala, and Inoue called him out and said, "We'll fight by the end of 2026. Well, it's been well reported even before that their teams have discussed that fight. Top Rank, which is the co-promoter for Nakatani, they've talked about doing that fight at the Tokyo Dome. It's a matter of time. They got to keep winning because they're not going to fight each other next. So there's going to be a little bit of time. And, tune-up fights have a way of disturbing things, as we've seen in recent times. But right now, in a way, he's booked for September 14th against Akhmadaliev. That's a mandatory that's long overdue. He's talked about at the end of this year to go to Saudi Arabia and fight for on a Riyadh season card. He's got a sponsorship deal with Turkey Al Sheikh and that outfit. And meanwhile, you got to figure it's not like because he fought here in the early part of June that suddenly Nakatani is not going to fight for the rest of the year. So I suspect, in a way, we'll go through and have it. He's got to win, but if he gets the 2 fights and takes care of his business, and Nakatani fights at least once more this year, then sometime, in the early part of 2026, they'll set that big mega fight up, and we will see that. And whether it's at junior featherweight, hopefully it will be. Maybe it'll be at featherweight, but the point is that fight is such a great matchup. Hopefully they'll get there. In terms of the way Nakatani took care of the business against Nishida, who was undefeated but did not have the kind of resume or experience as a professional that Nakatani has, who's got way more professional fights. He's now 31-0 with 24 knockouts. And if you're a person out there that dabbles in pound for pound lists, you better damn well have a place for Junto Nakatani somewhere, at the very least, on the lower portion of that list. He's a tremendous fighter. He's got great speed. He's got great power. He's got a good IQ. He's got a great team behind him in terms of his promotion and his management, and his trainer Rudy Hernandez did a tremendous job. And he likes to engage. He's a good boxer, but you can just watch the way he fights. He enjoys the combat. He liked it when he blew up the eye. He was pounding on that eye.
Yes.
And, Nishida just who gave a great effort, showed a lot of heart, stuck in there, landed his own good shots, a lot of good right hooks there, both southpaws. Was still trying to come forward in the 5th round and the 6th round with a busted right eye that he couldn't really see out of. Went
Crazy.
down to the body, but really everything, once the eye started to swell, it felt like everything in the fight changed because Nakatani continued to land heavy. He's the bigger puncher in my estimation. If you just look at the knockout percentages, Nishida only had 2 knockouts and 10 wins coming into the fight. But he looked pretty strong in the match. And once the eye was closed, it was sort of inevitable. You mentioned in the round before the fight ended, or in that round before they stopped it in the corner, he did. The ref did call a timeout and take him to the doctor, give him about a 5-second eye test. Can you see? And let the fight go. There's only about 20-30 seconds left at that point. And look, that's what happens. And it was not just the eye that was the cause for the stoppage. Apparently, he also had a dislocated shoulder. That was also part of the reason for the fight to end. So he had all kinds of physical problems. He gave a great effort. But Nakatani, look, ever since he went to the bantamweight division, remember, he's now a champion in 3 weight classes. He won his first title as a flyweight, also as a junior bantamweight. Now he's got 2 of the bantamweight titles. As he spoke about in the lead-up, he's happy to have made his mark as a 3-division champion, but he's always wanted to have a unification fight. He didn't get that in the other 2 weight classes. But ever since he got to bantamweight, he's won all of his fights in that weight class by knockout. He's won all of them inside the 6th round. So he's not taking prisoners. He's not waiting for anybody. He's taking care of business real quick. He's now 6-0 5-0 in the weight class, all by knockout, all inside 6 rounds. And it's not like he's beating bums. You know what I mean? He's beating guys who have challenged for titles. He's beaten now another world champion. He's beaten other. He beat a good fighter that beat Nonito Donaire to win the title, and other accomplished fighters. So, to me, as much as I enjoy watching Inoue fight, I think I like watching Nakatani almost as much.
And I believe that was his 5th fight since last March, all title knockout wins. So let's get
this was his
Nakatani.
5th fight since he won the title against Santiago in February of 2024. So less than a year and a half.
Wow. How about that? Let's hear it for activity. All right. One more. Then we're going to get in live here to a couple of more comments and then get to the news. That is Jai Opetaia, as expected, the IBF Cruiserweight champion. As I put up on the screen for the video audience, blitzes another easy opponent, Claudio Squeo, who nobody had heard of, from Italy.
And no one will ever hear from him again.
Yeah. And I saw you joking that he looked like somebody had taken an air pump to Canelo Alvarez, that he facially kind of resembles Canelo, and that they pumped him up with an air pump like a balloon. He looked like a blown-up super middleweight or light heavyweight. He did not look like a full-blown cruiserweight, and he was getting schooled for a lot of this fight from about the 2nd round on. Opetaia hitting him with straight left hands. And then, Dan, I did see this live on Sunday, and a lot of people have now seen it either live or watched it back on DAZN, where Opetaia caught him with a right on the left jaw, the left side of his face, and immediately Squeo's on the ground pointing to his jaw and looking at his corner like, he broke my jaw. That's what I took that to mean. So totally. Fight over. He's counted out. Your thoughts on Opetaia?
We didn't get like an official diagnosis, but I don't think you have to be a medical doctor to realize that's probably the case. I mean, a fractured jaw is not out of the question. Jai Opetaia is a 6'2" power punching southpaw with good volume, a good chin of his own. Remember, he fought through a broken jaw when he won the title for the first time against Myris Bredas in that same venue in Broadbeach, Australia. And this time he comes, this is a place where he's fought on a multiple of occasions, including his most recent fight before this one. And again, they are keeping busy. I mean, no one was saying Claudio Squeo is some dominating challenger that's going to be a true threat. But, you still got to be in shape. You still got to be prepared because anything can happen. And we see that all the time. But there's a difference when you're fighting a guy who's never left his home country of Italy, who's fought every single fight he's ever had has been against a complete nobody. You've traveled. I give him credit for making the trip. And then you look at them sized up physically. Opetaia is like cut from granite. As I said, 6'2" southpaw with great punching power and a great chin and a good amateur background on top of that. You got Squeo, who's 5'10", looks like somebody stuck an air hose up his ass and blew him up like Canelo. He's a shorter guy, doesn't pack a big punch, obviously. He hit Opetaia clean with a few shots. Didn't seem to bother him. He's now 17-1 with 9 knockouts. Who those 17 guys are, who the heck knows?
Right.
But this was a matter of, look, this is Opetaia. He's staying busy. He wants the Zurdo Ramirez fight. That fight is a fight that Golden Boy and the Opetaia camp have discussed. That's a fight that Turki Al-Sheikh wants to have. Both of them, Zurdo as well as Opetaia, have boxed in Saudi Arabia. And matter of fact, Opetaia has had 3 of his last 5 fights in Riyadh. Zurdo Ramirez had his most recent fight in Riyadh when he unified the belts against Chris Billum Smith. And it was always I remember talking to Eric Gomez from Golden Boy back, after the Billum Smith fight, maybe before the Billum Smith fight. The whole idea was we're going to do the unification. To make the unification happen, they promised to give Yuniel Dorticos the next shot as the mandatory, so he would step aside. He's a 2-time champion, the KO doctor, tremendous punching power. That fight is now made for the undercard, the co-feature when Jake Paul and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. have their fight later in June. And after that, you have, if Zurdo gets through that fight, which is not an easy fight in my opinion, but if he gets through the fight, you have Opetaia safely through against Squeo. There'll be an idea to try to make that probably in like October timeframe if they decide to move forward with that. That's the best fight you can make in the division. It would be to unify 3 of the belts. It would be for the lineal title that Opetaia has now defended, I believe, 6 times. And it's a great matchup, and it's a very exciting fight. So I really kind of took offense, by the way. Not Opetaia was totally cool about it, but his promoter, Mick Francis, the co-promoter from Tasman Fighters, which put on the card, and the commentator that was doing the interviews in the ring, whose name escapes me at the moment, were trying to make it out like Zurdo Ramirez has somehow been running and ducking and dodging Opetaia, which is absolutely ridiculous. He fought a unification fight against Billum Smith, and to get that important fight that Turkey wanted to do, had to give Dorticos the next fight as the mandatory.
Or they're going to strip him of the one belt out of the unification that he just did.
And in the fight before that is when he won the cruiserweight belt, the first one he had, the WBA title against Gulmarian. So there's no running involved here. And Opetaia is not running. It's just, timing is everything. And it feels like if he gets through the Dorticos fight, then will be good timing. Riyadh season will be back in effect in the 4th quarter of this year. And this will probably be one of the bigger fights in terms of unifications we see this calendar year. It's a great fight. And hopefully
I don't believe I've shared this with you privately, but I'll share it with the audience, and we're going to get to some comments. I intend, we got everything ready to go, to be out on the West Coast in Anaheim, California for the last week in June.
You told me that like 10 times.
Okay, did I tell you this?
Yes.
So
you're taking the kids to Disneyland.
I will be out there because my twins are turning 17 and they want to go to Disneyland, even though we live an hour, Rayfield, from Disney World in West Central Florida in Tampa Bay. We got to go 3,000 miles to the left and go out to Disneyland, but it's their birthday. We're going to be out there, and all things being equal, I will be at the Jake Paul, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., whatever that main event is, pay-per-view with the Zurdo Dorticos co-feature, and I will report that weekend, and we will see what happens and see if it sets up this Opetaia fight. Stay tuned.
Well, one thing Opetaia and Mick Francis, the promoter, said is they're going to be there in attendance to call him out or whatever, which is not really entirely necessary if they follow through on the previous plans, but it's still good for the photo op and to mingle and to meet people and to talk to some of the
get up on the ring apron and start pointing pro wrestling style, the whole bit. A lot of that will be going on that weekend. So good stuff. We're going to get to some news again here on the live show. A lot of you have joined us live as we're going along. We decided to do this live on Sunday night. We had fully intended, I'm explaining again, that we were looking to do a live segment to recap the Keyshawn Davis main event, the top-ranked main event on ESPN that everybody was going to be able to see in the United States. A funny thing happened, though. Keyshawn was about 18 Big Macs over 135. Did not make the lightweight weight. They did not have that fight, so we delayed this. Then Dan and I decided, you know what? Let's go live on Sunday night. And again, the pod audience, it's the same for you. I get it, but you're watching us live on YouTube, and maybe, Dan, they're watching us on demand Sunday night and Monday night. Monday night on YouTube.
PJ, I think they've got it by this point.
But there's a lot, but understand there's a lot of audience that's joined us in like the last 20 or 30 minutes going, what the hey, the boys are on. Here we are. And to that end, we have people weighing in with more comments. Mr. Adore says, good stuff. He likes the fact that we're live. Francisco says the heavyweight division is good right now. When will Jalilov get a high-profile fight? You got something on the it's Uzbek, right? The big Uzbekistan.
Jalilov is a very frustrating figure because he's very tantalizing and he's looked good in his pro fights. He's won everything pretty much everything by knockout. And he's got the 2 Olympic gold medals. He made a lot of money staying amateur though, because he was getting paid by the Uzbek government. So
right.
He's with Top Rank. And,
what has he had off the top of your head? A half dozen fights? Has he had 10 fights yet?
He's got about 15 fights.
About 15. Okay. So they're bringing him along.
But he doesn't need to be brought along. He's ready to fight. I mean, this is that seasoned an amateur heavyweight that has ever existed in the history of boxing. And he's won the 2 gold medals and he's been knocking everybody out. He's big and strong. He's a southpaw. One of his amateur wins in a very significant tournament to go towards the Olympics was a victory against Justis Huni, among many other name heavyweights. If you look down his amateur record that he's beaten, but there's nothing on the schedule as best as I know. Now he did just fight not that long ago. Remember when your boy Janibek had the defense in Kazakhstan? He fought on that undercard and got a knockout.
All right, my boy. Several more of you are weighing in. Cannon says Huni switches off last fight as well, but won. In other words, maybe got a little lax, got a little tired, got a little lax, and then got knocked out in this one. Who else is new to comment? Sid watching. Thank you, Sid. Says, great show, gentlemen. Love it. Jinru Jr. says, cannot wait to see Opetaia and Zurdo. We agree.
Agreed.
Gail says, I didn't know you were coming out to the OC. I will see you there. All right, Gail, not if I see you first. Just kidding. Love the PR Pro from San Diego. Anything else newer? I think we're good on the comments. Let's get to some news. And on this Sunday night, the International Boxing Hall of Fame induction weekend is concluding. You watched the induction ceremony. We teased this for the podcast audience. We teased it on the BetUS live boxing show Friday. Manny Pacquiao heading the class here, even though he's going to fight coming up next month in a return after a 4-year absence. What were your overall thoughts on the induction? Spend a couple of minutes here and tell us what you thought in upstate New York for the International Boxing Hall of Fame inductions on this Sunday.
Well, one thing, Manny did not promote his pay-per-view during the course of his speech, so I appreciated the fact that he let business rest for a minute while he reflected on his amazing career and the life that boxing has brought him. I will say this: there was look. It's a big weekend for all the inductees. It's a career and life highlight, but they got to do something about how long these people speak, because Pacquiao hit all the right notes, spoke probably 5-6 minutes, 7, something like that. It was really good. It was not too long. But there were some other people that were just on and on and on. Some of them, though, they gave some great comments. I really enjoyed, again, he kept it tight. I enjoyed the comments from Ross Greenberg, who was the inducted into the Observer category as a longtime executive producer of HBO Sports and also the former president of HBO Sports, who was highly involved for, years, decades in terms of the way their production looked. And, he's the guy that brought you the unofficial judge, Harold Letterman. He's the one that helped put together the legendary broadcast team of Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant, and George Foreman, and later Emmanuel Stewart and others that, brought the sound to HBO, did the look and created 24/7 and other things. Anyway, he gave a really great speech about some of the people that he worked with and the things that they did, and made the point that ever since the end of HBO, and he didn't say Showtime, but I know what he meant, that boxing has kind of got away in their broadcast from sometimes telling the stories of the fighters to make you want to watch. And it's not quite what it once was. And the outlets that still do it, while they still show plenty of boxing matches, they've kind of strayed from that part of the story, if you will. And he made a plea to get back to that in terms of what is shown to the audience to help develop an interest in these fighters. So I thought that was some good remarks. Somebody can maybe drop me a note and let me know what the heck Vinny Paz was talking about. I'm still not clear what he was saying. He's very excited, and the fans loved him, but I'm still not sure what he was saying. But they saved Pacquiao for the end. Oh, Kenny Bayless gave some great comments about his life as a referee and getting involved in it. You can find it on YouTube. It's worth watching, and you can skip around and go back to it. But look, they saved the best for last. The headliner of this event, the other besides Pacquiao, the two other men in the modern category, which is the marquee category, were Vinny Paz and also Michael Nunn, the former middleweight and super middleweight champion. He made some good comments too, reflected on some great mistakes he made in his life that cost him 16 years in prison.
Unbelievable.
He's come out the other end, and I guess is a solid citizen now. And
I didn't realize it was 16 years. I mean, what a redemption moment for him to be standing at the Hall of Fame.
He was in there for
wow.
a drug dealing conspiracy, basically.
Mandatory minimums too, being what they were in the 80s and the 90s. You were going away for a long time. Wow.
So he did his time, and he's come out the other end, as they say. And for a period of time in the like, I guess the late 80s, post Ray Leonard's prime, in that they were building him up to be like the next sort of Sugar Ray Leonard. He had a great amateur background. He obviously had won world titles at middleweight and super middleweight, had fought a lot of top names. And it just never quite panned out that way. But good to see him get his life back on track. And, and he's belongs in the Hall of Fame. He just hadn't been on the ballot for a while.
Yeah.
I voted for him. I thought it was a perfectly, you take a look at that resume. It's pretty damn good. But they saved Pacquiao for last after a long session of speeches. And Pacquiao, he talked about, being the underdog and the miracle of a kid that didn't have a place to sleep, but on the street as a kid, roaming the streets of Manila looking for food, that he could go from that status to world icon and, make hundreds of millions of dollars. And the point, he wasn't bragging about it. He was just making the point that if that can happen to me, anybody out there should never give up on what they're striving for, and that there's always a hope and a way out. And for him, he's still amazed, as I am, having covered it, and I'm sure lots of others, that a fighter like that was just, had nothing working for him in his life, had no amateur career of any kind to speak of, would go on and become the biggest star in boxing, the highest moneymaker in boxing for a period of time, be involved in the hugest fights, win world championships in 8 different weight classes, be it recognized title belts or lineage, to be a champion in 4 decades, to be at age 40 when he defeated Keith Thurman, the oldest welterweight champion, the oldest fighter to win a welterweight title, a record that he can break if he should win his upcoming fight against Barrios, which he did not mention. And it was really great to see Pacquiao take the bows and to give credit to the people that helped him get there. He gave special shout outs to Bob Arum, who was his longtime promoter that put him in some of the biggest fights during his heyday. Also to Al Heyman, who has been putting on his fights in the later stages of his career for the last few years. And they've done a great job with him. And, Freddie Roach and the team was there. I mean, he was very thankful for everything, as everybody was about the people that helped him get to, nobody's going to get to the Boxing Hall of Fame without some help from somebody. Whether of course. And it doesn't matter. You're talking about a fighter, you've got your promoter, your manager, your trainer, your support system. It could be a media person that gets inducted. They've got family members or other people or people in the business that have helped them along.
Somebody had to hire you. Yeah,
of course.
So
I always enjoy watching those things. To me, it's sort of like it brings everybody full circle, except in Manny's case, he's heading back to California, back to training camp to prepare for the Barrios fight.
All right, so good recap on that. We'll be here for a few more moments, a little more news and one nostalgia item. All right, so on that news, Dana White confirmed on Saturday night after the UFC pay-per-view in New Jersey that, yes, he was asked about this. Yes, I am TKO and I am promoting the Canelo Crawford fight. Turki Al-Sheikh then released a social media post saying the same thing. This is not that big of a surprise. There had been some uncertainty, I guess, but it's not that big a surprise, right? Pick it up.
No, I mean, it's not a surprise to me, but there was a moment there where he said that Dana would promote the fight and it was being planned. And then there was a moment where he backtracked and put out another social media post, did not mention Dana, which by omission meant he wasn't involved, and said that Sella, which is the Saudi agency that was going to be handling the fight. Now, that's interesting because Sella, I guess they could get a license, but they're not licensed presently in the United States. They'd probably have to hire a local promoter that has a license to put on the event. But as you said, Dana confirmed the fight. He will be promoting it, which you need a face. You need somebody to get out there and bark and make the, get the word out. I mean, we can all sit here and talk about how big Canelo Crawford is within boxing. But I'm here to tell you, in the mainstream, it's still a notable fight, but it's not Mayweather Pacquiao. It's not Lewis Tyson. It's not some of the big De La Hoya fights. It's a great, fascinating matchup for a lot of reasons. But the public needs to be made aware of it. And Dana White will be pounding that drum and getting out there in mainstream to let folks know about it. So it's a good move on their behalf. And because the fight's now going to be on the 13th, even before Turkey made that announcement, and even before Dana confirmed it in terms of his public comments at the press conference related to the UFC event, I had been told over the last several days that it will be at the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, and that probably will be back on Netflix. And so now that I hear that Dana is involved, it makes me think that the Netflix part of this has even got more possibility, because the conduit is the fact that TKO, through their wrestling deal, has relationships with TKO and Netflix. Together, they do the WWE shows, Monday Night Raw. They've got $1 billion deal there. So while I guess it could technically still wind up as a pay-per-view, I'm tolding from somebody that's involved that it's trending towards Netflix still going to do the fight. And now we'll probably be on the 13th and at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. So, after all
okay, so wait a minute. Let's clarify.
It's going to wind up the same way we all expected.
But let's clarify something. So Friday night, the 12th, is what they were looking at for Allegiant Stadium. The 13th has a UNLV football game.
But no, they won't have a UNLV football game. They will buy them out and move them.
Interesting that they that would be interesting on how and where they make that happen. And the UNLV game is a nondescript game,
right?
So that would be
If
interesting.
they come with the money and they pay the school, do you think UNLV, which is not a gargantuan revenue school, and they say here's whatever $1 million,
play on Friday night,
exactly,
by the way. But then you got to or play on Thursday night or something like that, depending. I don't know. Well, we'll see. That's a component, though. I just wanted you to clarify that, because the original intent was to play Friday night. The fight, the pay-per-view, or the Netflix was to be Friday night and play the game Saturday for the UNLV football game in that stadium. We'll see.
Who knows anything about boxing business knows that doing Canelo Crawford on Friday night is a disaster. It's a disaster if there is a pay-per-view, and it's a disaster for the gate, period. That's just, there's no way around it.
Unless
so many,
unless the Saudis, I'm just giving you a devil's advocate. Unless the Saudis believe we're going to pack that stadium, we're going to have it on Netflix where so many more people see it, and we don't care how much money we lose.
I'm telling you, they can't pack the stadium on a Friday night, because the fans that are going to gravitate to the fight, many of them Canelo's fans, are people used to coming to Vegas, coming in on Friday, driving from California or Arizona
wherever
on Friday, and attending the fight on Saturday. So they don't have to take a day off from work on a Friday. They leave after work, they get in, they party Friday night, they go to the fight on Saturday, they stay over, they hang out on Sunday, and they drive home. And to do that on Friday, and you're not talking about T-Mobile, which holds maybe 20,000. You're talking about a football stadium that holds, multiples of that. So it needs to be on a Saturday, but it's going to be in the stadium.
Good stuff with that. By the way, also Turkey Al-Sheikh and the Saudi Entertainment Authority say that August 16th will be the date of a card in Saudi Arabia with Moses Itama, Dillian White headlining. Fill in a little more about that.
Not a surprise.
On the way up. Yeah, go ahead.
Look, August 16th, for whatever the reason, has been a popular date. That was supposed to be when they were looking to do the fight between Teofimo Lopez against Devin Haney, once Haney Garcia wasn't going to happen. And obviously, we discussed that at length. We know that's off. That ain't happening. But they're still planning to do a show on that day. So Dillian White was not originally scheduled to be on the Queensberry card with Fabio Wardley against Huni. And then he was a late addition to that card, but they didn't have an opponent for him. And then he was knocked off the card a few days beforehand And I talked to some folks at Queensberry, and it was said to me, well, we've got big plans for him for something else. Okay. This is what that is. Moses Itama is taking a huge step up in class against a reputable, known heavyweight contender type who's fought for the title, who's fought against top guys a number of occasions. And Moses Itama is the #1 heavyweight prospect in boxing, a rising contender, age 20 years old. My prospect of the year for 2024, and pretty much everybody else's prospect of the year who also picks such awards. And so they'll be on this card in Riyadh. It's a true test for Itama. It's a chance to if Dylan White can bounce back and put himself in position for something big once again. And then they've also added 2 other fights to this show also. One is a title fight between the WBA featherweight title holder Nick Ball, who will defend against Sam Goodman, who was moving up from 122 pounds. Remember, he was supposed to be the mandatory and fight against Inoue, and twice he suffered cuts in training camp. The first time they postponed that fight from last Christmas Eve. The second time they said, you're out of luck, and they ended up doing a different fight. And Goodman had come back a few weeks ago, got a win, and now he's getting this title opportunity. He's going to move up and fight Nick Ball on this show. And then the other fight that Turkey put out there is going to be Anthony Kasachi against Raymond Ford in a non-title fight at 130 pounds, or maybe Kasachi will defend his fringe title, whose initials I won't even mention. But again, those are 2 of the better 30-pounders in boxing. That seems to be a good matchup in my book. And I'm sure if Turkey follows through and does the things that Turkey does, they'll add on some other interesting and good fights to give even more depth to the show.
Good enough on that. And so we do nostalgia also on the pod usually, and on the live show, depending on what the situation is. We have already done a nostalgia segment that is on this YouTube page. Go under the videos and see it. And that is for the anniversary of Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson. Dan has the hat on. Lewis Tyson is on, was the promotion for 2002 Memphis, Tennessee. So we don't want to give away and tip off a lot of what you say on that segment. Suffice to say, it was an unusual place, my hometown, Memphis, Tennessee. You explain why the fight was there. They need to go watch the YouTube video that's right here on this channel.
What a memorable week that was. One of the most memorable. I mean, I have covered, TJ, literally hundreds of fight weeks in my day. That's in the, if I'm making the all-time list, that's high on the list of the all-time fight weeks. Just a remarkable, remarkable fight week.
So relive Lennox Lewis, arguably the signature culminating win of his career, knocking out Mike Tyson, on this YouTube channel under the videos. It's right there with the June 8th anniversary from today, June the 8th of 2002. You also want to share about one other bit of nostalgia, and this fight is celebrating a 15th, or actually an 11th anniversary, June 7, 2014, which was Saturday. Miguel Cotto's TKO of Sergio Martinez, and that came in what, Madison Square Garden. You were right there for that, for Cotto that night, and a significant moment for him in terms of number of multi-division championships. Go ahead.
Yeah, June 7th, 2014, 11 years ago, on Saturday, yesterday, as we tape this or do this live. Look, Cotto was a fan favorite. We're always packing Madison Square Garden for his fights, rocking the house, and this was no different. He had won titles already in 3 weight classes, at junior welterweight, and junior middleweight, and had some big wins and fought a lot of good fighters. And when he lost, it was usually only to the very best guys. And this was an opportunity for him to fight Sergio Martinez, who was the bona fide middleweight champ. He was the lineal champion. He was the WBC champion. And Miguel moved up in weight to do this. And it was a matter of him trying to become the first ever Puerto Rican boxer to win a world title in 4 weight classes. It was a big deal. Puerto Rico has produced so many greats through the years and has such a rich history and legacy and tradition in the sport. So for him to be able to be the first to do that was a big deal. And look, Martinez obviously was compromised. He had a bum knee that was probably a little bit messed up going into the fight, but it did not really, it wasn't the reason why he got knocked down 3 times in the first round. And Cotto otherwise went on to dominate and ultimately stop him. Crowd, I do remember this. I mean, we talk about the rocking crowds that I've been in, and I always talk about the William Joppy fight against Felix Trinidad. I think about the Felix Trinidad fight against Mayorga, and I always think about the Cotto fight against Margarito when they met in the rematch. So those for me those are sort of the ones that stand out to me for Madison Square Garden, as well as Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz. But this fight with Martinez and Cotto, it was also a high level, massive, ridiculous atmosphere. I think of Cotto against Zab Judah, another one like that. But 21,000 going absolutely wild for Miguel Cotto, and a very vocal Argentine crowd there cheering on Sergio Martinez. But in the end, the knee just was too bad. Sergio's corner ultimately stopped that fight a few seconds into the 10th round, and it was like one big celebration with Miguel becoming a 4-division champion. Really, I mean, I feel like he was probably a Hall of Famer even before that, but that really was like a way to cement, give him a line item on that resume that had never been done by all the greats that had come from Puerto Rico to say, I got that 4th title belt. And it was just another great night for Cotto at the Garden, which was his home, where he packed the place time and time and time again. For me, a incredible privilege in my career to have covered every single one of Miguel's fights at the Garden, other than 2 that I missed because I was at bigger fights on the same night.
And also, Cotto just recently had the anniversary of the Cotto win over Salido, which was at Yankee Stadium, if I'm not mistaken. And we can't emphasize.
I don't know what you're talking about. You're getting the name wrong. It's Yuri Foreman.
Yuri Foreman, my bad on that.
What do you just get all your Jewish fighters mixed up?
Well, no, I'm trying to remember. Didn't he fight Orlando Salido as well?
No,
I thought, but maybe I have that part wrong. But
way off on the weights there.
Cotto, such a monstrous star, not only in Puerto Rico but in New York. You can't convey that enough during the 2010s, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah, no, he did the biggest crowds. I mean, he had 30,000+ for that Yuri Foreman fight at Yankee Stadium, where he won the junior middleweight title. That was another amazing night. As a lifelong Yankee fan, it meant even more to me to be there. That was wasn't the greatest fight in the world because he dominated so, but it was the atmosphere. But there's no, I mean, all due respect to my boys at Yankee Stadium, there's nothing like a Miguel Cotto fight at Madison Square Garden. And to be able to have gone there time and again to witness what those fans brought to the table. I mean, even when he fought fights that weren't as big, like I went to the Garden when Miguel Cotto fought Michael Jennings. That was a very small fight relative to the bigger fights Miguel had fought. He was coming off, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe he was coming off of the loss to Manny Pacquiao when he took that fight. And they still brought in a ton of people and made it a great night, even though it was a complete one-sided ass-kicking. I mean, Cotto, he was the biggest ticket seller in New York at that time. Right now, boxing does not have that type of New York ticket seller. They've tried to develop some people like that, and maybe somebody will become that. And we've seen still see fights in New York City, but since the Garden would love to find another Miguel Cotto to take up that of the guy that brings in all those people all the time.
And again, it was 11 years ago on the Martinez knockout. How about that? Listen, thank you for all of the insight. Thank you to all of you that have been watching us live on YouTube. Again, for the pod audience, it all got delivered the same way. For the video audience, if you didn't realize, we have a podcast feed, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. Go check that out. But for the video audience, help us out as you've been seeing on the screen. Make sure to hit subscribe if you are not. Hit the like button. Make some comments below the video. That will help in the algorithms with the video. I know a lot of you have been commenting in the live chat, but if you enjoyed the show, etc., make a comment or two below the video in the comments section. That helps us out as well. Anything else in closing? Are we good, Big Dan, for a Sunday night?
Yeah, we were good. I mean, there was action all through the weekend. It was a pretty good weekend of fights, other than the Keyshawn Davis disaster, but we'll reconvene for the next one.
Yeah, and we've got Richardson, Hitchens, George Kambosos, among others, coming for later this week. Again, follow or subscribe on all the podcast feeds, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify on the podcast. Thank you for finding us on the YouTube page. Go check out the videos for the nostalgia segments. More and more of you are finding those and liking those and sharing those as well. And we love doing those. Again, Big Dan has been at so many of these fights throughout this century. It's great to get his insight on that. Dan, have a great rest of the weekend. Let's have a good week. We appreciate it as always.
You bet, TJ.
There is Big Dan Rafael. I'm merely TJ Rives, and you've been with us live here on YouTube and on the podcast feed on the Fight Freaks Unite recap. Good night.